In this video, we're going to create a new JPQL query that will select specific fields from a record stored in our database. And we already know how to do it. For example, here we have created a native SQL query that selected first name and last name from a user record. So let's have an example on how to do it with Java persistence query language instead. And just like with the native query, our return type will be list of objects. So I'll reuse it, and then I will give this method a name, something like get user entity, let's say full name. So I'll do get, and let's do it by ID. And I will copy param user ID because I'm going to use named parameter in this example as well. Okay, so I have a method. Now let's create JPQL query. So that starts with add query annotation. And inside of these brackets, we will write the query itself. So I'm going to select a first name and last name. And I will go to my user entity and will look up the spelling of first name and last name. I'll go back and I'll say select first name, comma, last name from user entity. Now I'll give it an alias user. And now because I gave it an alias, I will have to use this alias in these two places, user.first name, user.last name, where user ID equals, and then the name of the named parameter. Okay, and again, in Java query persistent language, we use names that we have in our user entity class. So it's first name, last name, and user entity that come from this user entity class, the class name itself, and then the name of these two fields. And let's quickly create a test method to test this SQL query and see if it works. So I'll go to my test class, user repository test, and I will add one more test method right here. Okay, so I'll start with add test final void test, and I'll copy the name of the test method. And I will use user repository. Let me copy it here. And then get user entity full name by ID. And I will need to give it user ID again. Okay, and now this get user entity full name by ID will return a list of objects. So I'm going to use list, and inside of the list I'll need to use object, and it's also going to be array, and I'll give it a name records, something like this. Okay, and now I can assert that this record is not empty. There must be exactly one record in this list because I'm looking by user ID, and our database will have only one record that matches this user ID, and so on. So let me actually copy a little code snippet so that I don't have to type much here. Okay, so I'm certain that this list is not null. There is exactly one record in the list, and then I get that first record, and then I get the value of first name, last name, and I assert that these values are not empty as well. Okay, so hopefully this will work. Let me now save this, and I will run this single unit test only. So I'll click and bring up the menu, run as JUnit test. Okay, and the test method is passing, and we now know how to create a JPQL query that selects specific fields of a record that we have stored in the database. So let's continue.